All right, here we are. Welcome to That Aussie Bloke Music and Movies. Today we discuss the Beatles Revolver remix. Now I must apologise first of all for not dressing up, but I'm chilling out. That's what you do. Also just wiped off some Halloween makeup that I put on as part of my job this morning. I don't usually look like I've been staying up for sort of 3 or 4 nights in a row. I'm trying to do a Keith Richards impression. Not actually true. I was able to remove most of the makeup and I was successful in that endeavour. Very glad. Now, to the matter at hand, the Beatles Revolver. The vinyl version, just the one copy for me at the moment, thanks. Not this together with the mono thing with a big box and a couple of CDs and a booklet and all that sort of stuff. Not necessarily looking to make that much of an investment. I know the record very well, like many of you would. What's so wonderful about this? Well, there are a number of things. The thing is, with the mono mix originally, you can easily get that if you were clever enough to buy either the Beatles mono vinyl set on, I don't know, maybe till up to around about 2016, which is when I think I got mine, or you bought the Beatles mono CD set. You can hear the mono mix of this incredible record. Or maybe you're lucky enough to have a mono vinyl from a long time ago and you've looked after it and it's in good nick. Now, that's great, but mono gives you the directness, but doesn't necessarily give you all the nuances in the guitars and the bass and the drums. It's all put into one part of the sonic spectrum. And as long as your ears are able to sort of differentiate all those different elements of the mix, then you're doing great. If you can't do that, then the best way is to experience it from the stereo point of view. However, the original stereo mix had its deficiencies. Being a drummer and bass player myself, I love to hear what the rhythm section is doing, but I don't necessarily like to hear the drums in this side and the bass on that side. I'd like to hear it all together in the middle. And of course, some would say, well, just listen to the mono mix, and yep, not a bad idea to do that. However, what if it was possible to take this recording apart instrument by instrument, track by track, rearrange things in the stereo image so that there was a bit of a punch to the rhythm section, yet all these incredible guitar tones, string arrangements, brass arrangements that are also featured on the album were able to be heard clearer? Well, I would say that this remix is able to make that happen. It certainly worked for me. I'm not paid for this. I paid for this, the price of $70 Australian, which is a fair whack, a good amount for a new vinyl album. I normally wouldn't spend that much. It's like a lot of money, really. But I was able to buy it. I thought about the CD, but I thought, no, I might as well grab one of these single vinyl copies while I can, because I just had a feeling that they might become hard to find. When I found this, there was only one copy in the shop, and I had to go and get into a movie session about 15 or 10 minutes from the time I found it. So I'm ashamed to say I hid it somewhere else in the racks and hoped it would be there when I came back. It was. Whether this means I'm doomed to a lifetime of purgatory now as a result of that act, we'll just wait and we'll find out, eh? Anything could happen. Now, what is good about this remix? There's plenty of bass for those that like bass. Okay? Whether it's too much and whether it's been goosed a bit and given a bit of a, the sonic equivalent of amphetamines would be hard to say. It certainly seems like that. I didn't listen to it through the world's most expensive stereo, but I do know the record very well, as many of you also would, for sure. So a good amount of bass, but there's a good amount of bass drum. The bass drum doesn't overly dominate. The main thing that this remix does is give some more space in the instrumentation, enables you to hear more of what's going on in the arrangement of these absolutely incredible songs. And yes, I love every song. I have absolutely no problem with Ringo's vocal feature. Never have. It's interesting. It's weird, and it's a bit out there, like some of the other sonic textures on this album. It's not the Beatles album you go to if you want the safe Beatles. Yes, there are a number of nice ballads on there, but then there's some weird drugged out psych, weird trippy stuff, which is great. Do you know? You wouldn't have bands like Tame Impala nowadays without records like this. And the rhythm section is sounding great, as I've said. Point 1. Point 2 is, does it sound like the original record sound? Is there some sort of character, sonic character, that's been lost or compromised in any way? People are talking about digital artifacting that might be coming into it as a result of the processing that's been done to isolate each individual track and all that stuff, and yada, yada, yada. Great. I don't hear it. What I do hear is a mix that's been opened up, where if there's, say, for example, the strings, Eleanor Rigby, as many of you know, you have some cellos there, you have some violins, and there's that constant tempo throughout the song of Eleanor Rigby, that bump, 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 dun, 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 based on the music of Bernard Herrmann from Psycho, the great Hitchcock movie, which George Martin's string arrangement was influenced by. It's fantastic to hear the liveliness in these strings, and in fact I would say it adds a lot more drama to the song. As many of you know, there's quite a few serious songs on Revolver. Obviously the first one being Taxman, George Harrison's attack on the incredibly high tax rate that the Beatles were paying at that time, yet a song that has quite a lot of humour in it, that droll humour that George was so good at, but which has that great soul rhythm that counts us into the record and begins to take us on a trip encompassing some absolutely incredible sounding electric guitars, some punchy drums, and some tonic textures that are happy to take us to all sorts of sonic worlds. The sound world of this record is unique, in my opinion, anyway. So Taxman is great, and I don't feel that the mix of that song is particularly different. I'll just backtrack there and go on to where I should have started, which is Eleanor Rigby. The strings jump out, Paul jumps out. The song is not trying to make you feel anything, it's just presenting this sort of little slice of life with a different tonal centre, going from the sort of bluesy sevenths and soul influences of Taxman, perhaps taking into account some American R&B and soul influences. Perhaps Otis Redding comes to mind, or Booker T and the MGs, with those slashing, stabbed chords that sound like a 7th sharp 9th chord or something, the famous Hendrix chord from Foxy Lady. So in Eleanor Rigby, I think that's where the sounds of the remix first begin to come into their own. We sort of could say this is different. And I was affected, I think emotionally for the first time, more by Eleanor Rigby by listening to it via this remix. And of course we move on then to I'm Only Sleeping. The highlight of this is the way that the bass guitar is pushed forward. I feel like the acoustic guitars in that track are sort of pushed back in the mix a little. The quality of the song remains the same. John is pushed forward a bit more in the presentation of the song, and Paul is playing sort of double stops, or that is more than one note at a time on the bass guitar, and there's a super, super thick and round tone on Paul's bass on I'm Only Sleeping. Love You Too is the next song. Love You Too, as in Love You T-O, not T-O-O. The second song by George on this album. Not only does he get the first track, he gets the fourth track. Unheard of, really, but George was firing on all cylinders around this time, in my opinion, anyway. Great showcase for him, this album certainly is and was. With Love You Too, you get more of the sitars spread out across the spectrum. It's like this remix is just bringing the music closer to you, the listener, trying to put you as close into the songs as it possibly can. And the drone or the tambura effect during and throughout that song, Love You Too, is sort of pushed back a bit in the mix, but it's no less effective for that. Of course, we have a number of songs that have a droning effect or background sound on this album, Love You Too being the first one of those. Then, of course, track 5 on side 1, Here, There and Everywhere. A beautiful ballad, and what comes through in this one is the beauty of the backing vocals, but when there's little bits in between the lines, that sort of little arpeggiated but to see her is to need her everywhere, just before it leads up to that. That sort of minor little lick, the guitars, that sort of, these things are spread out in the mix, just featured for a brief moment. It comes out and then goes back in to the mix. You might say the mix is sort of more interactive, trying to make the songs come alive and live in their arrangement. And having done that, the featured instrument or instruments then moves back into the arrangement so you can appreciate it from that point of view. They're trying to make the songs sound great, that's not hard, but they're also trying to have the listener appreciate all the instrumental parts within a song. Yellow Submarine. Now, another great example of the sound world, Ringo's vocal feature, for those that don't know, and a first example on the album of brass band sounds. I didn't particularly find Yellow Submarine stood out for me orally, A-U-R-A-L-L-Y, orally. I like the song, but I didn't feel that the remix rediscovered it or represented it in any particularly amazing way. I still like the song, although I will say the marching band bass drum, boom, boom, in between those notes of the chorus, it's as if you could hear that by itself a lot more, like it was being recorded in a big room or something like that. That's not to say there's any reverb added to anything like that. This album is a very dry album. There's no reverb or anything like that going on in there. It's as if they just wanted to present it flat, and it was going to rely on just the songs for the excitement and production touches and the effects used within those. She said the bass is again pushed forward in this song. I've always liked this song because of the really interesting drum part. There's some great drum parts on this song. Being a drummer, I'm really biased there. The bass line really is pushed forward. It's a very interesting bass line. Some say that George played bass on She Said. All I know is that the bass playing is super, super tight and goes very well with what the drums are doing on here. One thing we will say is the drums They were in the middle of the stereo image, not off to the side, not off to that side, like so many other versions you've heard in the Beatles stereo discography where the albums were presented in the stereo mix. I've always wanted to hear what Ringo was doing because, like many other people, I appreciate what Ringo does and I like to study what he's doing. I can't sound like him. No one can. If there's anything you can get out of Ringo's playing, it's hopefully the fact that he is incredibly solid, different, groundbreaking, interesting, and his drum fills, or that is the little phrases played at the end of a number of bars, every 4 bars or 8 bars, whatever it might be, are very distinctive. His fills are very distinctive. Part of that's because he was a left-handed player playing a right-handed kit. His playing is something else. And I always think of it when I'm playing drums myself and trying to get people dancing because he's one of the best role models for that. She Said, the last song on side 1. Then we move on to side 2, which is where I think you start to see more changes in the presentation of the mixing of the songs and where perhaps the remix really comes into its own. Good Day Sunshine. This is a great example of where the group perhaps recorded more than one track of the same instrument. There's a number of different pianos on Good Day Sunshine, and these are put in different parts of the stereo mix. You can hear a lot more of what's going on with the pianos, and it gives you a different sense of the richness. I almost can listen to this and just imagine, see in my mind, just Paul sitting there in the studio running through and playing these chords on the piano. It's a very dense sounding song. Good Day Sunshine. Not much in there for you to chew on instrumentally. Of course, a fantastic melody. You can hear George's backing vocals, harmony vocals coming through more on this. And then at the end, of course, where it goes, Good Day Sunshine, and they start to harmonise. There is a sort of left and right effect at the end of the song on the remix. I thought that is probably one of the most effective examples, sonic examples of the remix. And I would say probably one of my favourite tracks from this remix. Now, And Your Bird Can Sing is great. You get more out of the drums on this particular track, and you can get more from your ear in terms of as you know, if you know the song very well, the lead guitar line there's a lot to it. You've got sort of a harmonised part, and there's all these a melody that goes da 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 da. It sort of just continues the whole way through, and then there's a harmonised version of that. There is a rhythm guitar in the background of this song that was always hard to hear. It's like someone just basically playing the same chord, brang, 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 all the way through. And you couldn't really hear the tonal differences between the guitars because the lead guitar line dominates so much and it's played with a harmony. But I would say the difference between the remixed version of And Your Bird Can Sing and previous versions is on the remix you can hear what the other guitar is doing more. It's got that more of a clanging bell-like sort of sound. Not so much a drone, but an interesting sort of sound to And Your Bird Can Sing, because the lead is sort of flows, and instead of a couple of notes it just continues on over a series of bars, and then of course even in the bridge section there's harmonised guitar lines as well. So there's a lot going on melodically, but really it's sort of two guitars, bass and drums with John harmonies on there. A lot going on. What he's on about, I have no idea. Some people say that bird means you know, I've read this book, I can't remember who it was by now. I've got a large Beatles books collection, and it might have been, I can't remember what it was, but Frank Sinatra used the word bird to mean a part of the male anatomy, and would use it in a conversation like, how's your bird? Not meaning, how is your girlfriend or anything like that. Apparently John saw this interview with Mr. Sinatra and found out that he used that word and using it for that meaning. And John decided to write a song that was aimed at Frank Sinatra, and your bird can sing. Whether it's true, I don't know. If you listen to it with that in mind, it doesn't really make much more sense. Although thinking of some of the lyrics in there, like, if your bird is broken, will it bring you down? Sort of think, well, I suppose, there might be something to that. There's certainly some parts that none of us would like to have broken. It would probably be one of those ones that's definitely up there as one that you want to remain intact, I suppose. And Your Bird Can Sing. A great song, a lot going on there, some great instrumental work, probably some of the Beatles' greatest instrumental work just using guitars, bass, drums and vocals. That obviously shows how much they were pushing the envelope with this album. Now, For No One, another remix and rediscovery of the song on this remix. A lot of work has been done on the piano in terms of those low notes that are being played on the piano as the fingers come down onto the keyboard and the chord progression descends. As you know, it goes dum da dum 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 dum. So you're going down stepwise. Paul's playing those notes, but the piano notes seem to be easier to follow, and you can hear the melodic, the way it all descends. The ears can pick that up easier on this remix, I would say. There's a lot of tonal richness. Also, the drums come through a lot more on that track. You can just, like I said before, you can really just appreciate the songs more through this remix. Some might say, okay, fair enough, you can do that with any record. I suppose they'd have a point, but I wasn't looking to be impressed necessarily by the remix. I made an investment, $70, and I thought, well, I hope it turns out to be a good pressing and not have any warps or all those other wonderful little descriptions that people talk about it and complain about when it comes to talking about modern record pressing, such as non-fill, and then they talk about inner groove distortion, all this other stuff. You think, oh wow, you could just go and talk about this and complain about this for hours. If you don't really want to go into all of that, buy the CD. But otherwise, do not buy things on this format and then complain about it. Yes, these guys have already made a truckload of money, but finally, after retaining or getting back the rights to their recordings and forming Calderstone Productions, they are now looking at new ways to market this stuff. And having done a couple of remixes already, a couple of classic albums, they finally find their way to remixing the one that I really wanted to hear remixed, which is this. For No One, a beautiful ballad. We'll move on now to Dr. Robert. With Dr. Robert, the guitars are left and right, placed left and right in the stereo image, so you can hear a lot more of what's going on. Dr. Robert, very similar to And Your Bird Can Sing, at least the lyrics are easier to understand. A lot going on with the fantastic guitar tones on this particular song. What they are talking about is apparently the dentist that may have slipped them some drugs into their tea the time they went round to see George's dentist. Sometimes I wonder whether it's Dr. Robert, a friend of theirs perhaps, Robert Fraser, being the art dealer, whether there might be a reference to him in there, which I won't go into, but I've thought about that from time to time. Fantastic guitar sounds, and has a bit of that Taxman thing with that sort of chopped rhythm guitar, some nasty sounding spiky chords, those bluesy sevenths that you get on Taxman. Dr. Robert also shares that tonality from the guitars. I want to tell you, now this is another one of the remix tracks that I think is able to be rediscovered. Big guitar sounds, you can rediscover what's going on in the piano chords. You can almost hear more in the piano chords, the actual notes in the piano chords, by listening to this remix. They're pushed up the front. As you know, that it's got a sort of bluesy bit at the beginning of I Want to Tell You, and then when it goes into the last part of the verse, there's a dissonant piano chord, and what that means is it sounds wrong, or it sounds off, or it sounds harsh to the ear, but you can hear all the hear that in all its clarity. Maybe you're not a fan, but the drums are also pushed back to the back of the mix and put wider across the spectrum. Another one I want to tell you is another track a bit like Good Day Sunshine. Lots of pianos. The guitar just sort of comes in at the end where it plays sort of da 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 dum da dum da da dum dum do da dum, and then it's da 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 da, and then lots of pianos everywhere. Bit of a piano album when you think about it. This one, Revolver. So big fan of I Want to Tell You. I think that is one of the rediscovered songs on it. I always loved the songs because of Ringo's really interesting fills. It's sort of harsh sounding. With a lot of George's songs, you're not really sure where he's coming from, how he feels about something. When you think about it, obviously with Taxman, yes, you know how he feels. I Want to Tell You, it's sort of like, okay, I'm sort of confused, but, if I am confused, it's okay, because it's just, it's only me, it's not my mind that is confusing things. What that means, I don't know, but it is confusing to me. Never mind, that's George. And of course, George's third song on the album. Way to go, George. And then, Got to Get You Into My Life. Now, I've been waiting for years. In fact, maybe I even bought this remixed album just to hear the remix version of that one song. Got to Get You Into My Life. Love it. Fantastic. Paul singing in, I'm pretty sure it's the key of G. Don't know if you're a singer, but if you sing that lower octave in G and you try to sing that higher octave, the octave that Paul sings in, when he's singing, I'm pretty sure that Long Tall Sally's in G. When he sings I'm Down, that's in G. He's going for those big high notes, screaming. And of course, the melody to Got You Into My Life is sort of nothing special. But then Paul goes for these big high notes. I was alone, I took a ride and didn't know what I would find there. It goes right up there. What's so great about what Got to Get You Into My Life is you can hear what the sax section is doing. It's not pushed off to one side and hidden away. The drums are still not super clean, crystal clear. None of the drums sound like that on this record because they all got mucked around with. But you can hear more of what the drums are doing. The saxes, they don't hit you over the head in that particular song, but it's almost like you can hear the difference between low saxes or baritone saxes and alto saxes. They just come through a lot more. The song is meant to punch, and in the original stereo mix, it didn't have that punch. I mean, you've got Paul singing, he's going for it, really singing, and he's not screaming at you, but he's just trying to get you to listen to what he's saying. There's no point having a brass section unless you can really hear what they're doing and it has an impact. Now, via the remix, the Revolver remix, Got to Get You Into My Life has a lot more of an impact. And at the end, when there's that breakdown, and then you have that guitar breakdown by itself, dun, 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 got to get you into my life. That's by itself in the middle of the mix, as opposed to pushed off to one side. And then, of course, you've got the outro with Paul really going for it and getting towards his more screaming voice, and the brass people going for those big high notes, playing it sort of in a more fortissimo way at the end of the song. So I would say that if I had to say one reason why I would recommend the Beatles Revolver remix, Got to Get You Into My Life would have to be my favourite song from the remix. I think it's been done very effectively. Now, of course, the incredibly psychedelic last song on side B and on the album is, of course, John's Tomorrow Never Knows. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, okay, well, there's so many tape loops on that particular song. That means there's going to be things going backwards and forwards across the image throughout the whole song. It's just going to be crazy. They have resisted the temptation to do that. While John is singing, there's the drones there, the drums are there, but when he's not singing, that's when they start to get creative with the loops from side to side. But you don't get the feeling, or I didn't get the feeling, that it was just done gratuitously just for fun and let's just muck around with this because we can. I didn't find that to be the case. I haven't listened to this on headphones yet, but I'm looking forward to doing that. I'll probably buy the CD so I can do that, and there'll probably be some greater clarity. But this vinyl version pressed in the Czech Republic did not disappoint me. There's a slight warp on the album, but it does not affect any of the audio pitching. It doesn't go as it goes around on the turntable. There was not a lot of nasty non-fill or bits of paper or other debris on the album. It was great. It comes with a white polyvinyl inner sleeve with the plastic in there. If there's anything I don't like about it, it's the fact that we haven't got a little piece of paper in there explaining the demixing and putting it back together process. I would love to know more about that. Would I have liked a free download? Yes. It's a bit of a shame when these very big acts that are internationally known, very prestigious, etc., seem to be a bit slow on the uptake in terms of giving a bit of extra value to the fans. I'd like to see a bit more of an effort made. But look, this is nitpicking because we've had a lot of interesting product, audio and visual, from the Beatles over the last few years, whether it's the remixes of albums or, of course, the recent Get Back movie. There's plenty of content on that. I haven't actually seen it myself, but I think it goes for something like 6 hours. I'd call that good value. Is this worth it? Depends how well you know the songs. If you're prepared to take a chance and hear some of your favourite songs done differently, you will not be disappointed. Whether you approve of the artistic decisions made and the mixed decisions made is going to be up to you. It's one of those your mileage may vary sort of things. I dropped $70 on this. I'm not sorry that I did. And that's what it's all about. I like to get value for my money when I'm buying something. And with this, I felt like I did get value for money. I hope that you feel like it was worthwhile what they did in regard to this. I'm envious of those that have never heard this record and for whom this is the first time they hear this record, because via the remix, because wow, it's something else. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back to the original stereo mix after hearing this, really. Just hearing a whole lot of things pushed into one side of the stereo image where I can't really make them out or differentiate between them. I don't know if I want to do that anymore. I'll still keep them all. But this is great, and I would recommend it to you if you're a Sonic adventurer. If you're into the Beatles at this stage of the career, there's definitely Sonic adventures to be had. Check it out. Enjoy. Subscribe to the channel should you wish. Thank you for your time. Wishing you all the best here from Australia. It's this Aussie bloke, that Aussie bloke, signing out. Have a good one, everybody.